I'm Rolene Marks. This is the Israel Brief, brought to you by Lay of the Land, where we bring you those top stories making headlines. Now, just a reminder, if you like our content, please consider sharing it. It really helps us when you do, and also helps get a voice from Israel out to as many people as possible. A reminder, you can check out our website at www.layoftheland.online. We are also on Facebook at Lottle's site. Also on YouTube, our channel is called The Israel Brief, and on Twitter at Lay of the Land 5. But without further ado, let's get into the top stories making headlines. And we begin, of course, with the Ukraine. Now, just a reminder that we will not be covering all the stories around Ukraine, but we'll be focusing on Israel's reaction and Israel's response. Now, we can confirm that at least one Israeli civilian has been killed in the Ukraine. 37-year-old Roman Brodsky was shot when his convoy came under fire as they were moving to be evacuated at the border. We can also confirm that 51-year-old Israeli sailor Yuri Shvitsky has been taken hostage by the Russian Navy. He was aboard the Ukrainian cargo ship, the Princess Nicole, when members of the Russian Navy came aboard and commandeered the ship. At the moment, Israeli diplomats are trying to search his whereabouts and hopefully bring him home safe. Now, earlier today, 3 plane loads full of humanitarian aid departed Ben Gurion Airport for Poland. The humanitarian aid includes things like tents, blankets, coats, medical equipment, medical aid, and other necessities. Israeli medical personnel are on the ground in Moldova and in Poland, helping to assist with the needs, medical and trauma of Ukrainian refugees. Speaking just a short while ago to Israeli officials, the Ukrainian ambassador to Israel has appealed to the Israeli government to continue to send medical aid, but also to help set up field hospitals for injured soldiers and civilians. The ambassador also appealed to Israel for helmets and protective vests, as well as the possibility of weapons. He was extremely emotional when he made this appeal to the officials in Israel. He has also appealed to Israel to ban what he calls Russian propaganda channels from broadcasting in the country. And while we're talking about channels being blocked, the European Union announced yesterday that along with a whole host of sanctions, they will be blocking the broadcast access of channels like Russia Today and Sputnik. This was followed earlier today by Google, who have also blocked access to those channels, and there is an appeal for YouTube and Facebook to do the same. Meanwhile, it has been confirmed that troops from Belarus have entered Ukraine to assist their allies, Russia. It has also been confirmed from an advisor to President Zelensky that the Ukraine understands the very, very sensitive nature and diplomatic tightrope that Israel is walking. Israel maintains good diplomatic ties with Ukraine and with Russia. The reason that we are still maintaining open ties with Russia is because the assistance of the Russians is needed in Syria to keep advancing Iranian encroachment at bay. It protects the borders and the national security of Israel. The advisor to Zelensky went on to say that Ukraine supports and acknowledges Israel's national security, and that the president is glad that Prime Minister Bennett was able to speak to President Putin. Ukraine sees Israel as the most likely candidate to possibly broker some kind of ceasefire between Ukraine and Russia. Meanwhile, President Zelensky, addressing the European Union Parliament earlier today, appealed for them to allow Ukraine to join the EU. He also said, "Prove to us that you are supportive of Ukraine." In a very, very emotional address, made more emotional, in my opinion, by his translator, who was really close to tears, he also went on to say that every town square, in every town, in every village, in every city across Ukraine will be called Freedom Square, and Ukraine is fighting for its freedom. In other news, we now go to France, where French President Emmanuel Macron has addressed the CRIF. This is the body that forms the leadership of France's Jewish community. In his address to communal leaders, the president said that he absolutely denounces any use of the word apartheid to describe Israel. He says, "How dare we talk about the word apartheid when there are citizens that are part of the government and enjoy positions of leadership and influence." He also went on to decry the United Nations for using what he says as unnecessary and inflammatory language that denies or erases any Jewish ties to the Temple Mount. The president went on to reiterate his strong ties and his love for the capital, Jerusalem. In news just earlier, the Israeli High Court has ruled that the 4 Palestinian families in Sheikh Jarrah will be able to stay there without eviction. Sheikh Jarrah is a flashpoint area and is seen to be one of the possible harbingers or catalysts for the May war that broke out between Israel and Hamas last year that lasted 11 days. The High Court went on to say that they will be able to stay there until a separate legal process has ended. And he said they went on to say that the Justice Ministry will now open an investigation into who exactly owns the land. The 4 families will have to pay a reduced but symbolic rent. And our final story takes us to a very, very special man who passed away yesterday. Harold Smoky Simon, born in South Africa, one of the original Machalniks, the Mitnadvei Chutz La'aretz that came from countries like South Africa, the United States, England, Australia, and others around the world to volunteer and fight with the fledgling IDF against the Arab advancement in 1948, passed away yesterday, just short of his 102nd birthday. A true man, a gentleman. Smokey was one of the original founders of the Israeli Air Force, and you can view his story in the Steven Spielberg documentary Above and Beyond. It was Smokey's dedication to preserving the memory of Machal and all those who fought. And it was his love and dedication to Zionism, the state of Israel, and future generations who he said must be proud of Israel, all its achievements, and must fight for its security. Earlier today, the Israeli Air Force also paid tribute to this man who, modest and gentle, was one of the greatest legends that this country has seen. A real son, not just of the state of Israel, but the pride of the South African Aliyah community here in Israel. I was very privileged to meet him, as were the other members of Lay of the Land. And please look out for a dedication to Smokey that will be up on our website pretty soon. Smokey is survived by his wife, his children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren, and may his memory be forever blessed. So this brings us to the end of today's edition of the Israel Brief. I'm Rolene Marks. Thank you for watching. Please join us again tomorrow when we bring you your top stories from Israel.